be muted during the presentation to prevent excessive background noise. The working group members are asked to hold questions until the appropriate time during the presentation. After each segment, we do have a few minutes, for instance, for transportation or for traffic or urban design for some questions. And then at the end of the meeting, we will also have time for the working group to ask additional questions. The working group should use the raise hand feature, which is if you go down to the participant list on your screen at the bottom, you will, if you click on that, you will see an option for you to raise your hand virtually. At the end of the meeting, hopefully we'll have some time for public comment, and the public can provide either written Q&A, which is again down at the bottom of the screen, or they can raise their hands. We want to make sure that that we're respectful of all the time frames, so we may ask you to hold additional questions, and you can always submit them online via the website. And next screen. So right now I wanted to just do a roll call for working group members. So if you can unmute yourselves, or I will take care of that actually. I'll ask you to unmute yourself. Justin, you're unmuted. Okay, it looks like if those of you who are still muted, you can unmute yourselves. I'm going to run through the list of working group members that we have. If you could just let us know you're here. If you are representing an organization, if you're not the primary participant but are an alternate, you could let us know which organization you're attending from. That would be great. So first we have Charles Arnold from Lowell Bike Coalition. Okay, not here. Adam Bakey from UMass.
I'm here.
Adam, good. Rick Berry from Trinity EMS. Okay. Stacy Butel from Walk Boston. Paul Kavanaugh from Mass DCR. Maria Dickinson from City of Lowell Economic Development. Eileen Donahue, City Manager for Lowell.
Present.
David Ellingson from the Commission on Disability. Gerard Frechette from the Planning Board.
I'm here.
Excellent. Tom Golden, State Rep.
I think he's here, Kate, because I see his name in a little green window here.
Let's see. James Otis. Oh, here somebody is. Yeah, I've just asked the person to asked him to unmute himself, but we see somebody is here from his office, so I will check off. John Hamblett, co-chair of Pawtucketville Citizens Council.
Yes, here.
Chris Hayes, City of Lowell Neighborhood Planner.
Yes, here.
Justin Howard, NIMCOG Transportation Program Manager.
Here.
Kara Keefe Mullen, Assistant City Manager. Senator Kennedy.
I'm here in his place, James Ostis.
Okay, thank you, James. Jim Lamp, Market Basket. John Lindberg was not able to make it. Peter Murray, you're here in, for the boathouse, correct?
Present.
Great, Representative Mom. Representative Nangle.
Brian Hoey, Representative Nangle.
Great, thank you. Kelly Richardson, Lowell Police Department. Derek Schuster, Regional Planner,
Good afternoon. Thanks for having us.
MassDOT Office of Transportation Planning. Frank Szynski,
Present, Frank Szynski from District 4, representing District 4.
Diane Trad, Department of Planning and Development.
Here.
Natasha Vance, Transportation Engineer, City of Lowell.
Hi, I'm present.
Joseph White, President and CEO of Lowell General Hospital.
Ellen Murphy Meehan is here. I do see that Jody White is also on the line, but I'm representing Lowell General Hospital on the phone.
Okay, great. And Alan, what is your phone number? I'm just, I want to rename you so we.
Sure, 978-273-1331.
Just
Thank you, Kate.
971.
978-273-1331.
Okay. Not seeing it. Oh, 1381. There we go. I just flew by that. We'll rename that. Okay. Thank you, Ellen. Jeffrey Winward, Lowell Fire Department Chief.
We actually have a new interim chief, Joseph Roth. We're in the process of hiring a permanent chief, so I'm not sure if Chief Roth is on or not. He probably didn't get this invitation.
Okay, great. I'll work with you after the meeting. We can make sure everything's up to date then, Kara.
Okay.
Thank you. And Beverly Woods, Executive Director, NIMCOG.
Here.
And then we also have Brian Murray from Mass DOT. You're on. All right. So with that, the next slide, I want to just move on and explain that, as we mentioned, we're really thrilled to get this project going. Excited to have your input and so pleased that you've agreed to help us with this. This working group meeting one objective is really a listening session, and we're going to be presenting traffic, urban design, environmental issues, costs, and things like that. And specifically, we're going to be asking you for input on preferred bridge alignments. So we'll be showing that. And with that, I think I'll turn it over to you. Steve, would you like to make some opening comments?
I would. Thank you, Kate. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Steve McLaughlin. I am the project manager from Mass DOT on the Rourke Bridge Replacement Project. It's great to be here. This has taken us a little while due to recent COVID events, and thank you for bearing with us. It's great that we can have so many of you with us in this forum. It is new to us. I'm sure it's certainly new to you, but please bear with us. The project is still advancing, and we're excited about that. Just want to step back and give you an overall view of what we're looking from you on this. A lot of you know, and you're going to hear it a few times while we're here. A planning study was done several years ago, and as a result of the planning study, it recommended 3 alternatives to study. We're here today to try to talk about these 3 alternatives and then whittle it down eventually to 1. Subsequent to that 1 alternative alignment, we'll have a type study discussion. And the type study is, what type of bridge do we want to put in here once we have an alignment? Is it a steel bridge? Is it a concrete bridge? Is it a cable bridge? What is that? Now, generally, the type of bridge is formed by the function of the bridge. How wide does it have to be? How long does it have to be? How high does it have to be? And then the structural elements are formed by that. But there is a lot of room for discussion, and we certainly will want to have your input on the type study phase. Following that, we'll go to the sketch plan phase, where the bridge is geometrically designed to the ground. It all fits. We have an alignment, we have a type, and we this is the first design of the bridge itself. At that point, we'll acquire some necessary right-of-way and we'll complete the environmental permitting for the project. Then we'll put it out for a design-build process. And at that time, contractors and engineering firms will team together and give us proposals. We will select probably 3 firms, 3 teams to compete. And the lowest proposal fee will be selected. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be the lowest price fee, depends on the quality of the team that we have. It generally is, not always. Subsequent to that selection process of that team will bring the project to a final design, and then construction will begin. Actual construction itself will take about 36 months. Their design ahead of time will take a little bit longer than that. Overall costs, we're over in the 120 million and counting for the design of this project, or the construction. About $120 million, maybe a little more depending on what alignment we take. And that is in today's dollars. We haven't brought that into future with inflation. Inflation these days is a little hard to gather. So with that, why don't we go forward? Oh, can we go to the design team slide, please? Just back up a little bit. I do want to talk about who we have, our experts. HNTB is our lead design team for the bridge, and they're doing the major structural analysis and the major highway design. McMahon Associates are traffic engineering experts, and they'll be speaking later on. They're doing a comprehensive study of traffic analysis of the site. Urban Idea Lab are going to help us with bridge architecture and urban design. On either side of the bridge, we want pedestrians and bicycle travel to be greatly enhanced over what it is now, of course. And the river on either side, we want to have that accessible. And Urban Idea Lab and Crosby, Schlesinger, and Small Ridge are certainly going to help us with that. Our lighting designer is Domingo Gonzalez. We won't have a lighting design developed on this with Domingo Gonzalez completely, because it's going to go to design build, but they will help form the concept of lighting, whether it's lit from above or below, and the style. So they'll help a lot. Regina Villa, where you see Kate already, they're helping us with public involvement and public engagement. Epsilon is helping us with environmental permitting, and Welsh Associates with survey. We've done a lot of survey already. You may have seen people out there over the last few months counting cars and doing survey and doing some geotechnical boring. So that's already been on way for the last several months. So with that, Topher, why don't you take it away, and we'll get into the weeds a little bit on talk about alignment.
Thank you, Steve. My name is Topher Smith. I'm a project manager from HNTB. I'll help guide our next steps here. So just a reminder of our objective for today. There are 3 alignments that were put forth with the previous study. And our first goal of this project is to identify which of those 3 alignments we will move forward on. As Steve mentioned before, there are lots of other features and parts of this project: bikes and pedestrians, cross-section, how we will handle intersections at either end of the bridge. All of those are really important features, but we can't get to those features until we focus on which of these 3 alignments that we'll go forth with. So a little bit of history of the project. Probably everyone on is familiar with the 2013 corridor study and feasibility analysis that was done by NIMCOG. It was a very good study. It looked at a wide range of alternatives for crossing the river and narrowed it down to the 3 that we're going to be talking about today and moving forward with, and then narrowing down to a single alternative. In 2017, Mass DOT did road safety audits at the intersections on either side of the bridge to identify safety deficiencies and areas and opportunities for improvement. And in 2019, this team was selected and awarded the contract to move forward with the design services for preliminary design. The scope of these services are, again, first and foremost, identify the bridge alignment, and identify the type, the cross-section. That cross-section for both bikes, PEDs, and emergency vehicles. There's a hospital very nearby and is an important component of the project. Intersection design, and then advance onto that preliminary design, our 25% highway design and bridge sketch plans. That'll be in conjunction with environmental permitting, which could take a variety of courses depending on which alignment we select. So we'll be talking about that a little bit more later today as well. And then it will go to, it's going to move forward with a design build project at this point. The work that's been done so far, what have we been doing in the last year? As Steve mentioned, we've had people out on site. We've been doing our survey. We flew the site, did an aerial survey. We've had people tying that down to the ground for our survey. We've had ecologists in the field doing wetland delineation, identifying environmental resources. We've had, you may have seen boats out in the water that we're going and doing some measurements for a geophysical evaluation to identify where rock is underneath the structure, underneath each of these alignments to help us evaluate it. We've done a preliminary hydraulic analysis to start to learn about how the new bridge may interact with the river. We've started this public involvement process, establishing a plan, and we're living it today as we're here. We started to do some urban and landscape concept evaluation. We've done our traffic counts, and it's important to note that our traffic counts were done in the spring of 2019 while school was in session and pre-COVID. So we do have good data, and it includes vehicles, pedestrians, bikes, and trucks. We've started our safety analysis and traffic modeling as well. The schedule as we continue on, we've done our data collection as we just described. We started off, we did do a legislative briefing, and we briefed the city council this spring. And here we are on the green dot on the screen, focused on our first round of public meetings. So each of our rounds of public meetings will include this working group and then be followed up with a full public meeting on the same topic. And so the purpose of today, I've mentioned it before, is to be focused on the selection of the preferred alignment, to give you this status and really to listen. We want, we're going to talk and tell you some things, but we want to listen and hear you. The next step will be in the fall after we go back and hear what we've heard today and at the public meeting and do some further evaluation. And we'll come to that second round of meetings to present a recommended, the alignment that we're leaning towards. We'll also present some additional options of what we're starting to think about for bridge type, intersection designs, how we're going to handle the cross section and the bike and pedestrian facilities. Then we'll do the same, go back to the drawing board, spend some time evaluating the feedback that we've had, and we'll come back to the third round of the meetings in the winter to present our recommended bridge type and explain where the direction we're headed with intersection design and bike and pedestrian facilities after we've received all that feedback. When we'll receive more feedback at that third round of meetings, and then we'll advance it into our preliminary design. 21 and 22, we'll have a formal design public hearing as with all Mass DOT jobs. And then in 2022 and 2023, we will advance we'll continue our permitting depending on the course that takes. And it will go design build for design build contract procurement that Steve described previously. Most folks on the call know right where the Rourke Bridge is on the west side of Lowell, crossing the Merrimack. Project limits for this project are in yellow on your screen. They are Pawtucket Boulevard to Middlesex Street, encompassing the Rourke Bridge, and then continuing one intersection to the south to Princeton Boulevard as well. We'll also include work at the Old Ferry and Pawtucket Boulevard intersection to the north. So the purpose of our project, every project needs to have a purpose and need. And our purpose and need statement focuses on the following. First and foremost, this project is about replacing the bridge. The bridge that was built in 1983 as a temporary structure has been there a very long time, and it's long past to replace the structure. It's also to enhance safety and connectivity for pedestrians, bikes, emergency vehicles, and watercraft. Everyone who uses this structure. And that's why we have a wide range of people participating today to provide feedback on all of those. It needs to be a bridge for all modes, not just vehicles. It's also to improve safety operations at the 3 intersections that we described previously along Wood Street. The need, the bridge itself is functionally obsolete. It doesn't have shoulders for emergency vehicles. There are no bicycle accommodations. There's inadequate approach intersection capacity that really constrains traffic flow through the site. There's also the substandard pedestrian walkway on the west side of the structure that is far too narrow for 2 wheelchairs to pass each other, for example, and it's enclosed and very tight. There's also maintenance issues with the existing structure, constant deck patching, and the structure is old enough now that they don't make replacement parts. Replacement parts have to be fabricated. So, additionally, on the need, safety and operations, as meant before, Mass DOT has done road safety audits at these 3 intersections shown on the left of the screen and evaluated issues with safety, and those need to be rectified as a part of this project. And with that, I'll pass it off to Maureen Schlebeck from McMahon, who will talk first about traffic.
Thank you, Topher. So Topher described for you a very distinct study area, but when we look at the traffic impacts of the project, we really look at a more expansive study area. So we are showing here in this graphic 15 core intersections that are shown in red and an additional 17 intersections. So we've studied these 32 intersections from a couple different aspects. So I'm going to speak to you about the crash analysis, about existing and projected traffic volumes, about the travel patterns and the origins and destinations of the areas. And then I'm going to compare the safety and operational features of the 3 alternatives. So let's begin with the safety analysis. We looked at crash data for a 5-year period. We had looked at the years 2013 to 2017. We are well aware of the crashes that have occurred recently, and unfortunately the pedestrian fatalities that occurred on Pawtucket Boulevard. So we'll use the 5 years of data that we have collected plus new data to understand the safety deficiencies in our study area and inform our design to improve safety conditions. What you see in this graphic is some of the most dramatic crash locations. If it's shown in red, it indicates that it falls within the top 200 in the state. The locations that are shown in yellow have been identified on MassDOT's Highway Safety Improvement Program, and you'll note intersections that are denoted as 24 and 55 were mentioned by Topher as having had road safety audits. So all of that information will help us on our project as we develop the specifics about the design. At each of the intersections, we broke down the crash data by both type of mode that was involved, whether it was cyclists, pedestrians, motor vehicles, and also by the severity of the accidents. So it was important for us to understand where property damage only accidents occurred versus personal injury accidents. Next slide, please, thanks. We did a very extensive traffic count program, in the spring of 2019. It consisted of turning movement counts at all 32 study area intersections. We also collected 7 days worth of data on the Rourke Bridge itself. And what you can see here is the Rourke Bridge data broken up by direction and by hour of the day. So what we typically see is a real sharp AM peak period and a sharp PM peak period. And while we see the AM peak here, we see a more expanded afternoon peak. So there's a lot of traffic on this bridge. It amounts to about 24,000 vehicles per day. And it occurs at high volumes for a good part of the day. The next graphic shows you turning movement counts at the core intersections for the AM peak hour. We have a similar graphic that shows the PM. And if we zone in on one of these intersections, you can see that we've counted each mode. We have the bike counts, the pedestrian counts, and the motor vehicle counts. So as we have developed the base year traffic volumes, our next step is to look out 20 years from now. This is a major infrastructure project. We want to build something that will last the future traffic volumes in the area. So when we develop future traffic volumes, we start by considering how much background traffic may grow. And we use the regional traffic models in the area to inform us on that front. But we also identify specific generators in the study area that are probably over and above the background growth. And the most predominant one here that I'm sure you're all familiar with was the recent addition of Market Basket on the north side of the Merrimack River. So we have taken the traffic that's generated by these special generators and superimposed it upon our background traffic that's been grown out to the year 2039. We spent a good amount of time understanding the travel patterns in the area, particularly because we're crossing a river and there's only a few distinct points where you can cross a river. It's important to understand what we do to the Rourke Bridge could change travel patterns on either side of us along the river. So we've used data that was collected by a company called Streetlight Data, and they take cell phone data and GPS data and also actual volume counts in the area, and they can generate a whole wealth of information for more than a year at a time about where people are coming from and going to. And what you see in this graphic is a number of different origin locations, which are shown by black dots and saying like, okay, if you, for example, if you were to start at Varnum Avenue to the west side of the bridge, are you more likely to take the Rourke Bridge or the Mammoth Bridge if you were to cross the Merrimack River? So we have this for AM and PM. And then on the next slide, you'll see we did it on a more regional basis, looking at traffic zones and who's traveling where within the region. A lot of it was what you would expect, but again, important to know so we can understand how our improvements influence the travel patterns in the area. And this is showing you PM by zone. And then if we move on to the next slide. So now that we've pretty much identified what our base year traffic conditions are, and we've generated future traffic conditions, we tended to focus next on, let's look at the three alternatives and how they relate for each mode of traffic in terms of traffic and safety. We're often struck with wanting to make the best operations for everybody and the safest conditions, and sometimes there are trade-offs, and I'll speak to some of those specifically when we get to the intersection improvements. When we compared alternatives 1, 2, and 3 from a traffic perspective, alternatives 1 and 2 were virtually identical. So you'll hear me compare alternatives 1, 2 to alternative 3, and then to the future no build. So on the next slide, one of the things we looked at were regional travel times. And we did this to try to understand like the capacity that we've added along the improvement route. Has that helped us in our regional trips? And as you can see here, we have a couple different routes laid out, and in each case, the build alternatives save 1 minute to 2 minutes. The only exception was if you began on Wood Ave and went to Varnum Ave to the far east of the site. Alternative 3 is slightly longer than no build only because the alignment has been moved to the west. But in most cases, all 3 build alternatives improve travel times by a considerable amount. So this is AM. The next slide will show you PM. Oh, I'm sorry. This is AM. We did the same thing for PM. On the next slide, we wanted to highlight the fact that we are aware of the hospital being so close to our study area and realizing that this is an important travel route for people in the study area. What we're showing here are travel times for non-emergency vehicles. This doesn't take into account any Opticom or using sirens or anything. This is generally the average person driving their family member to the hospital. And again, you can see that there's pretty good time savings with the build alternatives. So this is one of the things, well, I'll just speak a little bit more about safety and operational aspects, but this is one of the places we'd like to get input from the working group in terms of whether we have these travel routes staked out correctly. So if we move on to, I think we'll pause after, you want to pause after the
Yes, let's do
next
that.
couple of slides, yeah. what I'd like to do is walk you through what we see as the improvements on the intersections by alternative. And again, as we start on this first slide, I'm going to talk about build 1 and 2 collectively because they yield the same alternatives. We're going to focus in on these 4 core study area intersections. And so there's some things that were done across the board. At the signalized intersections, we constantly improved signal timings and we improved the clearance intervals. Whenever possible, we provided exclusive pedestrian signal phasing. What that means is when a pedestrian's crossing, all vehicles are stopped at every approach. And wherever possible, we've added bike lanes to the street network. If you look at Wood and at Middlesex and Wood at Princeton, I'm sorry, if you can back up, sorry, Topher. Those 2 intersections are the same under all 3 alternatives. The improvements that we've listed there match for all 3 of the alternatives. So at Wood and Middlesex, we've added some capacity by providing a southbound left turn signal phase, and that was truly in response to the crash analysis as we saw a lot of angled collisions. At all of the signalized intersections, we are working to keep volume to capacity ratios less than 1, meaning that everyone gets through on 1 cycle of the signal. You're not sitting through 2 cycles. If we focus on the intersections to the north, that's where we see a little bit of difference between 1 and 2 and 3. So on the next slide, you'll see we'll focus in where the Rourke Bridge intersects with Pawtucket Boulevard. And the most major improvement here under Build 1 and 2 for the vehicles is that we added capacity, particularly for the westbound left turn movement. We added a second left turn lane and we've added capacity on the northbound approach. Again, then we have pretty good levels of service, C and D. We have V over C's greater than 1. For pedestrians, we added crosswalks to every approach. There currently are not crosswalks in every approach. And another improvement, and again, this is the trade-off because for a vehicle, the channelized right turns are more proficient, but they're more dangerous for peds and cyclists. So we eliminated the channelized right turn lanes and put conventional right turn lanes as a bike and ped improvement. We've added bike lanes on Pawtucket Boulevard and on the Rourke Bridge. As we move on, so this is summarizing the intersection improvements for Build Alternative 3. And I've already spoken about the 2 to the south, so I'll focus mostly on the 1 on the north. Now, the difference on Alternative 3 is that it now intersects Pawtucket Boulevard opposite of Old Ferry Road, which creates a 4-legged signalized intersection. It reduces some of the conflicts along Pawtucket Boulevard. It's 1 signal less that you'll encompass as you're traveling that route. We've added capacity to the intersection. We've got levels of service E and D, which are adequate for this type of environment. Again, our volume to capacity ratios are less than 1. The ped improvements are similar. We've added crosswalks on all approaches, and we have exclusive pedestrian phasing. We've also added bike lanes on Pawtucket Boulevard and the Rourke Bridge. So as we compare alternatives 1, 2, and 3 from a traffic and safety perspective, they're fairly equal. They are all much better than the future no build, but one doesn't stand out far above either of the other 2. And at this point, I think I'd like to open it up to the working group to, if you have specific questions that you would like to ask on the traffic front.
So I'll just jump in and remind everybody that if you could just use the raise hand feature, we'll get to you in the order that your hand is raised. I believe you have the ability to unmute yourself, and if you can do so once I call your name and then mute yourself once you've asked your question, that would be great to help us manage the meeting. So John Hamblett, you've had your hand raised for a while. If you'd like to go ahead and ask a question.
Thank you. I have questions for Mr. McLaughlin, Mr. Smith, and for Maureen. I'm sorry I didn't get your last name. My first question is, I am a vice chair of the Pawtucketville Citizens Council, and if you're not familiar with the geography of Lowell, the Rourke Bridge, as it heads north, dumps all of its traffic into Pawtucketville. And so we are very conscious of the safety issues, and in particular, anything that drives more traffic through the main parts of our neighborhood. We did have a fairly detailed traffic study done when Market Basket did that, and we had a peer review. We know that there are 5 intersections along this route that qualify for the high crash database at Mass DOT. We also know that there are 4 more intersections along this route where it's been vehicle versus person, and those have been above average for similar roads. I guess one of my first questions for Topher is, you mentioned a traffic count that you took in 2019. We're very aware of the increased traffic that Market Basket is going to generate, about 5,800 new trips every weekday and 10,400 new trips on Saturday and Sunday. When do you think you will be updating your traffic count, which I'm assuming didn't include these vastly enlarged numbers?
So I can pass that actually to Maureen, because we have been communicating.
Great.
And we do have that information. So Maureen, please.
Yep. So when we developed our future year traffic projections, we actually took the Market Basket traffic study and took the traffic that they were projecting that would occur out there and superimposed that onto the street network. So the Market Basket traffic is in our projections. In terms of going back out and doing a spot count to test the validity of their projections to see if they're on target, that's something we can do down the line. It's a little difficult right now. I know traffic volumes are still down, in the 20-25% range from pre-COVID-19. So that's a good point. We take that to heart, and we will consider additional counts at Market Basket when traffic normalizes and we could get decent information.
Okay. Yeah, of course, the other thing is Market Basket isn't open. So it'd be great to hold off until after COVID, and once Market Basket is open to do that, traffic count.
John, excuse me, I just wanted to, we have some other people with their hands raised. Can we go to someone else and we'll come back to you for your next question?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. So Natasha Vance, if you want to unmute yourself.
Hi, yeah, I'm the transportation. Oh,
sorry.
That's okay. I'm the transportation engineer for the city of Lowell. I actually didn't have a question. I just wanted to mention something with regards to the Market Basket traffic to John. So as part of the Market Basket traffic mitigation for their site development, they are going to do a post-occupancy monitoring for 5 years, and it'll start 6 months after occupancy. And then 12, and it'll be at 1 year, 2 years, and so on. So we will get that documentation as to whether or not their estimates were accurate. And I just wanted to make that point that that's something that's included in their plans.
Yeah, Natasha, I was aware of that. I just wasn't sure if there was a connection. Are you the connection then between Market Basket's 6 monthly reviews after occupancy and this group at Mass DOT?
Yeah, sure. Maureen and I met early on in their project development, and we talked, and that's where they got the information regarding the city projects that I put them in touch with development services. So yes, please, I'll be happy to be that liaison between McMahon and Pawtucket Citizens Council and the city.
Great, that's super.
So we actually need to move on. We'll have time at the end of the meeting, and of course you can always submit comments or questions via the website, but right now we need to move on to Deneen Crosby, who's going to be talking about urban planning.
Thanks, Kate. We've been considering the different ways that this project can contribute to the city and the adjacent neighborhoods. These are some of the principles that we've come up with, contributing to the character. This is a major structure being built in this part of the city. And I think many of us think of the downtown area when we think of Lowell. So This is going to contribute to the character of this part of the city. Certainly the design is important. We were curious whether the alignment affected character. And so we looked at some vantage points and whether you could see the bridge in one place, but not in a different alignment. Contributing to safe and effective connections for bicycles and for people walking. This includes certainly the bridge itself and accommodations on the bridge, but it includes the connections once you get off the bridge. How do you get to your destinations, whether it's shopping, a neighborhood, a park, and is there a difference between the three alternatives? Contributing to open space, the bridge lands in green space on both sides of the river. This part of the city has both a regional open space system, the National Park Service, the Esplanade, the State Forests, Edward Street Park, which is a very important soccer venue for kids of all ages, and a number of local ones. So how well it connects to those places we would look at. And contributing to city vitality. This is a combination of making connections to destinations, again, parks, shopping areas, and how comfortable the sidewalks feel. Can you get there safely? And it includes the activity on the river, which is a great resource here in the city. The events there, whether you're participating in them or you're an observer. So these are some vantage points that we identified looking at the three alignments. A is UMass Lowell South Campus at the base of Broadway by the river. B is the Boathouse. C is the Esplanade, and there may be others. But each of the alignments is identified with a different color line, and you only see one because they pretty much all look the same from these particular vantage points. Now the design, once it's designed, they'll look different just because the perspective is going to change. Alignment 3 is skewed while alignment 1 is perpendicular to the river. Next. The character and the experience of being on the bridge. That upper photo is the existing bridge, and the bridge goes straight across the river and it's crowned in the middle. So while you're driving on this bridge, you largely notice the cars in front of you and the roadway. And this is the same for alignments 1 and 2. Alignment 3, because it's skewed around to one side, your view as a car, a biker, a pedestrian is towards the river itself. So there might be an opportunity here to have a greater visual engagement with the river. The bottom photographs, go back. The bottom photographs are examples of gathering places on bridges. You could do this with any of the various alignments. The alignment 3 really lends itself to doing something like this at the landings on either bank. Next. Connecting to recreational facilities. On the south side, the bridges land in pretty much the same place. So Edward Street Park, you could make a connection from any of these alignments. On the north, depends what direction you're going in, but I think it's worth mentioning that there is green space along the river within the entire area of any of the three alignments. And so the possibility of having a nice pathway connection to recreational facilities on the north side is there with any of the three. Next. We want to connect to multimodal connections, those there now, like the public walkway, the shuttle routes, but also those planned. Maureen talked about the bike lanes on Pawtucket Boulevard. We know there's a Sharrow plan for Old Ferry Road. And in 2013, there was a trail on the south side identified. So we'll look at the connections to all of those. Next. Walking times. Just across the water, alignment 1 is the shortest, 7 minutes. It's the bridge you have now. Alignment 3 is the longest, 9 minutes. And as far as nearby destinations, on the south side, because they all land in the same place, the walking time is the same. On the north side, it depends if you're going east or west. Of these very nearby destinations, the greatest difference was if you were going from the south side of the river to the boathouse. In which case, if you're on alignment 1, 7 minutes to cross the water, another 5 to the boathouse, total of 12 minutes. If you're on alignment 3, 9 minutes to cross the river, another 8 to the boathouse, 17 minutes. So a delta of about 5 minutes in walking time, and you can decide if that's significant for you. Next. Crosswalks. We know you had a very serious accident recently on Pawtucket Boulevard. We want to make sure that once people get off the bridge, that they get safely to their destination. So the location of crosswalks is extremely important. Maureen talked about the intersection design. With any of the schemes, there's a signalized intersection at Old Ferry, and there's the existing crosswalk at the boathouse. 1 and 2 introduce another signalized crossing and crosswalks at the midpoint. Next. And water related activities. We want to look at these both from the standpoint of being a participant and also being an observer. So boating, which is very important to the river, we know that certainly when the bridge is designed, the placement of piers is extremely important. As a participant, does the skewed alignment of alternative 3, alignment 3, does that affect the way this activity happens? Do any of the alignments make for better viewing locations of regattas on the river? Next. And these are a few of the other river events that we know are happening that we want to consider. The Bay State Marathon runs across Rourke Bridge now. The Dragon Boat races. Again, these kinds of events are very much an important part of the vitality of the city, and we want to elevate this, not do anything that hinders any of these activities from happening. So these are some questions that we put together. I think it's really important for us to understand where the destinations are, where people are walking, where they're going when they get off the bridge in either direction, where they cross the street, and are there any future destinations, anything that we haven't shown you on the plans presented today?
So now we'll take, there's 3 hands up, so if we can ask questions quickly, we can move on to the next section. I think let's take Chris Hayes first because we haven't heard from him yet. Chris, do you want to unmute yourself? And
Sure. There's obviously a lot to discuss, and I assume there'll be an opportunity to provide more feedback in another way. My immediate question was, we have plans that are, we have Go Lowell bicycle plan, which I don't think is integrated into this. It's not finished yet, and that's probably why. So I'm wondering how you would like to integrate kind of ongoing planning practices into your planning.
Well, we'd certainly like to see any work as it's progressed so far. I think, you know, the more we want this to be integrated with everything that's going on in the city. So, you know, I don't know how we get that document or that update for you. Maybe Kate can talk to that, but we'd be interested to see, you know, what are you thinking so far so that we understand how it affects this.
Just let me chime in, Steve McLaughlin here. The Lowell bike plan, who's putting that together now?
So Tool Design is the primary consultant on Go Lowell, and it's actually multimodal. It's also transit and pedestrian, but I think it's most relevantly bike in this circumstance. And the city of Lowell, Natasha and I are managing that project.
Okay, why don't we just have a sidebar conversation? We'll find a day, we'll get together and let's chat. We obviously want to integrate the project with the plan. So thank you for that, and we'll be in touch.
so next, Derek Schuster, if you'd like to unmute yourself?
Yeah, I'll try to be brief. I really think if we're going to be limiting the questions, that the moderator should open the written message feature to actually get more feedback and questions to be addressed, because that's not open at the moment. On transit, since it looks like the priorities for the bridge are pedestrian, bike, and vehicular, has LRTA or the region identified any desire or need to provide bus or transit service across the Rourke Bridge on any of these alternatives? Bueller?
Well, that's perhaps a question for, we have not talked to LRTA yet.
Okay, I've met with them in the past just for some of our regional planning efforts, and I suspect that they should be a stakeholder and part of this process in case some of their plans would be to add a future route. Additionally, I noticed that the Rourke Bridge goes over a railroad right-of-way, and I know that the New Hampshire planners have been adamantly trying to pursue their capital corridor plan to eventually connect from points north and Nashua south to Lowell. So I just want to make sure that any stakeholders from New Hampshire, their plans or anything with the Massachusetts Rail Vision is taken into account with whatever design Lowell and your team decides to move forward with.
Mm-hmm. Those are wonderful points, and the MBTA and Pan Am will be engaged for conversations as stakeholders as they run under the bridge.
And the last quick thing was whether or not alignment 3 or alternative 3 has solar glare concerns heading southeast. I know it's a concern in other parts. Just thought I'd raise that while I remember. That's it.
Thank you. Let's take one more quick one from John Hamblett.
Thank you.
Make it brief, please.
Yes, I'm hoping that in our next meeting, we'll be able to reformat it so we're able to get all of our questions out, or a little bit more time to get our questions out. I'm going back to a series of questions I was asking before. It falls somewhere between Topher and Maureen. You identified a traffic study area. In the traffic study done on September 14, 2018 by our peer reviewer, we included West Meadow and Varnum. And I think because according to their trip distribution summary, actually more traffic goes through the Varnum-West Meadow intersection than the Old Ferry intersection, that I'd like to see that added to the traffic study area. And then Maureen, you spoke about channelizing right turn lanes. You're probably aware, but you had mentioned that it actually makes it more difficult for pedestrians. Currently, pedestrians can curve around and walk under the bridge and then back over onto the other side. So in fact, we don't have to cross the street at all. And that right turn onto Pawtucket Boulevard makes a big difference for a lot of people. So I would encourage, if the new bridge could be built in the same way, that path that goes through Vandenberg could remain under the bridge. You avoid that problem. That's all for now.
Thank you. And I will just ask you the reason we're asking people to be brief is we have a jam-packed agenda. We want to get to everything and also provide you with opportunities to comment, and also the public attendees to have time to comment, which is why we ask you to be respectful of the time. So next we're on to the environmental topics.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I am going to review the applicable federal and state regulations that would apply to this project. Then we're also going to take a look at the 3 alternatives, compare the environmental impacts and the regulatory implication of the three different alignments. So on the federal side, there's a full suite of environmental regulations that will be complied with in some way, shape, or form, including but not limited to the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, Section 404 of the Clean Water Act, administered by the Corps of Engineers, Section 106 of the Historic Preservation Act, some sort of compliance with Section 9, U.S. Coast Guard bridge permit. We have open space permitting requirements under Section 4F and Section 6F. Project is also going to comply with the Endangered Species Act, and will also have a EPA permit under the NIPDES program and a construction general permit. Next slide. Similarly, on the state side, there are a number of permitting requirements. This project will comply with everything listed here in some fashion. Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act, MEPA, being first and foremost among them. But there's also open space requirements covered by Article 97. There's Wetlands Protection Act. There's Public Waterfront Act, and then state water quality certification. May also require a construction access permit from the DCR. It is possible that the project may qualify for a bridge exemption. This provides relief to MassDOT, MBTA, and certain municipalities from certain permitting requirements. It is by no means a free pass, but it would lessen the requirements under MEPA Chapter 91 and the Wetlands Protection Act. This is based on bridges in a similar alignment and with a functional equivalence. Based on the study of the three alignments, we do see that they are in a similar alignment. The next question is functional equivalence. So that is an option on the table. A quick look at the wetland and river impacts. The predominant wetland feature at the site is, of course, the Merrimack River. This is a dam-controlled section of the river, so there is a lot of control over the water elevation. To the north side of the project area, there are vegetated wetlands, and the south side is, improved due to the railroad. No wetlands located in that area. So we did a field analysis of the wetland resource areas. In green, you can see the bordering vegetated wetlands, and in yellow is the bank resource. Looking at alternative 1, it has minimal or zero wetland impacts. Alignment 2. Alignment 2 carries with it significant wetland impacts, approximately 5,600 square feet of impacts to bordering vegetated wetlands. We'll cover that in a couple slides. Moving on. Alignment 3 has about 1,800 square feet, at least with this preliminary design, 1,800 square feet of permanent impacts to wetlands. So what this means, and I'm talking specifically about alternative 2 in this scenario, is that it may not comply with Wetlands Protection Act performance standards. If that is the case, a variance would be required under the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act. A variance results in a mandatory environmental impact report under MEPA, which could add significant time to the development and delivery of the design of this project, conservatively in the 18 to 24 month range in terms of a schedule impact. So that's just something we want to keep in mind. All 3 alignments exist within floodplain, but in all 3 instances, any impacts to floodplain will be compensated adequately to not result in any floodplain rise. There are a number of open space and recreational resources in and around the project area. To the south, we have Edward Street Park. On the northern abutment area is the Lowell Heritage State Park, DCR, and also to the left of this screen is the Wang Soccer Fields, City of Lowell. The 3 alignments will comply with state and federal open space regulations. However, it should be noted that the Lowell Heritage State Park carries with it a 6F designation of the Land and Conservation Act. That carries with it a significant, well, it's additional process. So when we look at the 3 alignments, the inline alternative has minimal impacts to 6F lands. Alternative 2 has significant impacts to the 6F and 4F resources. Alternative 3 presents the project team with an opportunity to more or less avoid the 6F resource at Lowell Heritage State Park. Further on environmental justice, the project team is well aware of the environmental justice populations within Lowell. The project will comply with all state and federal environmental justice policies, and we do not anticipate any adverse impacts to EJ communities.
So with that, we have some time for, if we could keep these questions specific to the environmental discussion. John, you have a question?
Yeah, so Alex, this project touches on traffic and flooding, the 2 most sensitive issues the Pawtuckettville Citizens Council has dealt with for the past 14 years. As you're aware, in 2006 and 2007, we had 100-year floods, and the area where Market Basket is, and in fact as far back as where the Buddhist temple is, it's 94 feet. It was 5 feet underwater, and Pawtucket Boulevard was closed. That's happened 7 times in the last 68 years. And so one of the things that we would be looking for is no relaxing of the wetlands regulations, even if you're eligible under a bridge exemption. We had 72 homes lost or damaged in those floods, and we were lucky there was no loss of life. But I can't imagine that there is a more sensitive issue in this particular neighborhood than flooding and wetlands regulations. We are routinely in front of the Conservation Commission about any new developments along the waterfront. So I just really wanted to make you aware of the extreme sensitivity of one of the issues that you're going to be responsible for, and I can give you more feedback on that anytime you want. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. That is good to hear. I know I touched briefly on an exemption, but by no way does the bridge exemption that I described relax any floodplain requirements. The project does exist within floodplain. We do know that, but we will take measures to ensure that there are no impacts to the floodplain without compensation.
Right.
So that your point is very well taken, and it will be acknowledged by the project team.
Yeah, compensatory storage is going to be tough in that area, but good luck. Yeah.
Understood.
Great, thank you. All right, again, there will be time at the end of the meeting to have a general discussion. We'll try and reserve as much time as possible. We also want to give the public a few minutes to say, and just to remind folks, we have checked, and the QA feature to submit written comments should be visible on the bottom of your screen. So if you want to write in a question rather than speaking it verbally, you're more than welcome to do that. Topher, if you'd like to take it from here.
Wonderful. So we'll touch on cost and schedule as well. They're important components of the project. And something you'll see here, I understand that this is not your normal slide with lots of words on it. This isn't the fine print, but it's to explain where we're at in the process and some of the parameters around the costs that we're going to be sharing today. Not everyone who gets this slide deck will have will hear us talk. So we wanted to have something in writing on the slide to explain that. So there are many factors that are going to influence the project cost as the design gets developed. You got some examples, including the structure type. It could vary considerably what the cost was, depending, as Steve mentioned, if it's steel, if it's concrete, the different span arrangements that we have. If we do something with cables, it will be more money. But for the purposes of apples to apples comparison, so that we can comparatively look at these three alternatives and identify which of these alternatives we want to move forward, we had to keep some things the same. So we selected an 84-foot wide structure, steel stringer structure type, a consistent number of piers for each of the alternative alignments. And also, as Steve mentioned before, the costs presented in this presentation are in 2020 dollars. They don't include escalation. The current circumstances make it a little bit more challenging to identify what that escalation number should be. FHWA typically carries 4% annually for escalation. But for example, Massport and the airport community right now, they're projecting 2% on their projects moving forward. So that is something that may change. So as a result, we're looking in 2020 dollars. And so the construction costs, as we've evaluated based on that width of structure, those piers, and that type of structure, alignment number one is $107 million. That's driven by two-stage construction. Alignment number two has single-stage construction. It's built offline from the existing structure. So that alignment affords the luxury of one single stage while the existing structure stays in place. As a result of that, that alignment is a lower cost alternative at $100 million. And then alignment number three also affords that single stage construction, but it is longer. And the value currently in today's dollars with that width are $114 million. Now, construction duration, that varies amongst the different alternatives. Alignment number one is going to add an additional year because the existing structure will need to stay in place while we build half of the new structure. The new structure is going to be wider than the existing structure. So it'll have to be built offline, half of it, while the existing structure is in place. And then traffic will be shifted over to the new structure while the existing structure is taken down and the new structure is widened out to accommodate the additional lanes and bike and pedestrian facilities. That's going to result in more construction duration. Alignment number two and alignment number three, because of the single stage, will be the shortest for construction duration. Now, the timing of the bridge opening is a little different. Alignment number one still adds that year because of the two-stage construction. Alignment number two, while construction may happen faster, there's some implications with the variance that may be required because of the wetland impacts that are associated with it. They're greater than 5,000 square feet. So that process would take longer. Alignment number three, timing from now to bridge opening would likely be the shortest because it has that single stage construction and it has less than 5,000 square feet of wetland impacts. And it also affords us an opportunity to avoid that 6F, I want to say it avoids impacts to the property that triggers the 6F process. Now, we've started to evaluate potential criteria, kind of bringing all the things that we talked about together. And those are on the right of the screen here, and they're kind of in the format of, in the order of how we presented things in the presentation today. We're also listening and hearing and marking things down, taking notes as to how this may want to evolve. But with that, I will open it up. Potential criteria on the screen, but which are most important to the members of the working group? And are there others that should be considered as we move forward?
So we do have, I think we can consider this, Topher, probably our general discussion times. We have about 10 minutes or so for this. If you could, again, use the, raise your hand. We'll recognize you as your hand goes up. But as Topher said, we are really interested to make sure that we've hit things on the nail and what we're missing. So Natasha?
I just have one comment to make. Okay?
Yep, sure.
So, and thank you, Topher. When we talk about the cost of the bridge, I want to let everybody know that the design and the permitting is funded. We have funding to complete design and permitting. we do not have identified an identified funding source for the construction. That eventually will affect us in the design process. There are some permits that we cannot get without funding. We cannot acquire right-of-way without the funding source identified either. So at some point, and this is more toward the 25% design sketch plan phase, we won't be able to acquire right-of-way unless we have the funding source identified. I just want everyone to know that. I don't want to make promises we can't deliver.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Continue on with the selection of the alternative.
So, all right, that's great. Thank you, Steve, for that clarification. So why don't we open it up again to raised hands to talk about what you've heard so far, and in particular, this slide on the screen. It's extremely important for us to know what's important to you so we can make the appropriate criteria. Natasha, if you'd like to go ahead and unmute yourself.
Sure, thank you. First, I just want to say thanks for this detailed presentation. I think it really lays out the benefits to all the different alternatives. Obviously, I'm the transportation engineer for the city, so the thing that's most important to me is traffic operations and safety and bike and ped mobility. I think just looking at this, to me, it looks like alternative 3 is what I would consider the preferred option from my perspective, which I understand is not the same as for everyone. And as far as construction cost, I don't know if this project team is tasked with doing anything about trying to determine where those funds might come from. But there are a number of federal programs that, like the infra grant or the build grant that, consider $100 million and below a small project. So it seems like there might be some options from the federal government to fund this bridge. So.
Okay, thank you, Natasha. John Hamblett?
So I'm going to break this list of criteria down by how it's broken down visually. I see 4 groups. And if I were trying to order these in order of importance to Pawtucketville residents, the first group, traffic operations and emergency response, would be first. The third group, wetland impacts, river impacts, and open space, would be second. The third would be views, pedestrian, recreation, and water. And then we're not directly impacted by construction cost. And so I think that the last category would fall last in our list.
Thank you, John. I do not see any written questions or raised hands. I just want to make sure that that's the case, and everybody from the working group who would like to ask a question or make a comment has that opportunity before we open it up to the general public. Beverly Woods, go ahead. You'll have to unmute yourself, Beverly.
I just had a comment about the costs that are laid out here. When you look at the actual timeframes for construction, and that some would take longer than others to get started or longer to complete, I don't see that there's really that much of a difference in cost, because time is money and costs rise over time. So I'm wondering if there's been consideration to doing some kind of sort of equivalency analysis for each option based on the realistic perspective of construction schedule, to really make sort of a more level look at the true cost of each option going forward, because a lower cost option, if it's going to take longer to construct or longer to get started, is really probably not going to cost any less in the long run than alternative 3, which can get started more quickly and the construction takes less time. So I didn't know if that was a factor in those costs that you developed, or if it's something that you're going to look at going forward.
So, I'm sorry, was that Steve?
Yeah, just Beverly, I appreciate the lens with which you're looking at it, and I think we ought to, we ought to look at it like that. Makes sense.
Yeah. And we've started to look at that, but with the uncertainty of what that escalation would be, we did leave that out to make it clear to this, the apples to apples comparison. Again, it's a very good point, and those numbers start to come a little closer together, because As you mentioned, the higher cost alternative in today's dollars can get built sooner, and that factors into it and makes those.
Well, I think it's important in that for some people, cost is like the number one consideration they might have in terms of the alternative that they prefer. So I think it needs to be sort of well thought out, and for other people, other things are more important, which is why I think why Kate put this question forth in terms of what is most important to people. But it's I think good to look at it so that it's truly understood that, you know, from my perspective, from an operational perspective, and from a lot of the input that we heard during the feasibility process, I think alternative 3 is the one that the community would like to see going forward. It certainly, you know, has equivalent traffic benefits. It doesn't have as many environmental impacts as alternative 2. And I just wouldn't want someone to have their opinion impacted by the cost factor if what's being presented isn't necessarily the true picture.
Thank you, Beverly.
Just one comment, Beverly, as well. Some of the permits that we're looking for, and you know, one of them would be a wetlands variance for alignment or alternative 2. And I think the standard for a variance is an overriding public need. So we would have to demonstrate that there's an overriding public need for alternative 2 over the others. And this is why we're out to the public, and we're asking, you know, how do you view all of these alternatives? And that one may not score well as a result of that. On the other hand, 6F or 4F, I know the performance standard is a prudent and feasible alternative. So we want to, for a impact on a resource area such as 4F land, we don't, we look at all other prudent and feasible alternatives, and alternative 3 may be that prudent and feasible alternative. And alternative 2 may be that prudent and feasible alternative, that impact on alternative 1. So we end up with this back and forth. So anyway, the point is, we'll look at cost in a different lens as well.
All right, thank you, Steve. Chris Hayes, you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to let you know, I don't think the panelists actually were able to submit written questions. I think only public was able to. And I was wondering if you could clarify. I know there's going to be more questions than we have time, so I'm wondering if there's written questions afterward, if we can expect answers, if there's additional kind of opportunity for back and forth feedback for some of the more officials that like have these ongoing planning projects.
Absolutely. So with the, well, Topher or Steve, if you want to talk to the officials part of it, I will say that there's an opportunity for people to submit comments and questions at any time, 24/7 via the website, which you'll see here on the screen. You know, we've kept the meeting to 90 minutes because it's a lot of screen time for folks. We want the panelists to be able to have a verbal conversation, which is why we're asking you to raise your hands. This is a working session for you. For the public, there may be people who are shy and don't want to speak verbally, so the Q&A feature is available, or they can raise their hands. So does that answer your question, Chris?
Oh, just in terms of, I know the officials haven't had much time to have back and forth conversation during this either, and I was wondering if there'd be another opportunity before the next really big working group for more specialized discussions or anything like that.
Steve, do you want to?
Let's, obviously, we've got to talk as much as we have to get this right. That's important. So Chris, why don't you contact us and let's figure out how to get this right. You know, we do have a public process, but it's certainly flexible. So let's get in touch and continue to talk.
Yeah, I mean, clearly with the limited screen time, we have to be speaking in other formats. And Representative Golden, you had a...
Kate, thank you. I just want to say thank you very much. It's been very informative. I appreciate putting the team together here at Mass DOT. 1, 2, and 3, I think we all have our opinions on that, but I think you folks laid it out in a very clear and concise manner. I also want to give a shout out to John Hamlet, who I think did a fabulous job on raising some concerns from the neighborhood's perspective of traffic and whatnot. But Steve, Kate, your team has been there and been doing a great job doing this. There are a lot of questions I know that we're going to continue to have over this process, but really it was an opportunity to say thank you for including everybody. Sorry I missed you guys earlier, but as the chairman of Telecommunication, Utility and Energy, telecommunication on Zooms just hasn't been my forte as of late. With a couple problems with my own computer. So thank you again for the team for putting this together and keeping the folks engaged.
Thank you, Representative. John Hamlet, you had a question. We have a few more minutes for the working group, and then I want to save some time for the public.
Yeah, no, this is a quick comment to Deneen Crosby. Deneen, are you there? You're not on my screen anyway. You talked about neighborhood character and some things that are very important to us. I wasn't sure if you had an opportunity to look at the Pawtucketville master plan that we put together in 2006 and 2007. We go into neighborhood character and some of the things that are important to us in great depth. We spent 2 years putting that together with a lot of the people from the city and the state. And we're also having that updated now. If you don't have a copy of that, just shoot me an email or give me a call and I'll send you a link.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Great. Let's take two more. Ellen Murphy, Meehan.
Yes, thank you, Kate. I appreciate this very much on behalf of Lowell General Hospital. We appreciate being invited. And I just wanted to flag the issue of ambulances and construction. It's certainly down the road, but if any of the options can be organized in a way so that ambulances are more freely able to traverse the Merrimack River, it would be very advantageous. I know that when the Merrimack Street, Kearney Square bridge over the canal was to be replaced, we really put a lot of time and effort in with the downtown group to make sure that ambulances, particularly paramedic vehicles, would have enough room to sort of get through. And at the time, Merrimack Street was only going to be one way for a short period of time during construction. We had it open two-way. Something to just keep as a note for the future. We care a lot about the public safety aspects of the bridge construction when we get to that point. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hey, I'm sorry if I could jump in there. There's a question that we had for the group, and that reminded me of it. Was what is the path that emergency vehicles take from the bridge to the hospital? Do they typically take Pawtucket Boulevard, or do they typically take Old Ferry if they're headed north and going to the hospital?
I think I'd rather make certain I get that absolutely right. So thank you for the question. I know that the Rourke Bridge has been on our agenda for a long, long time because it is not a great way to cross over the river, certainly during many hours of the day when there are a lot of commuters. But I will get you an answer to that, Topher. Thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Yes, thank you, Topher, for reminding me. Jerry Frechette, you had your hand up. It's down now. I just want to make sure that you are all set before we open the meeting to some questions from the public.
Yeah, if I could, thank you, Kate. I appreciate it. I just wanted to piggyback on Beverly Wood's comments as well. I mean, this discussion has really been decades in the making. So, and I was on the original working group, and I've favored the option 3 for the longest time. And I think a lot of the reasons why were articulated during this meeting. Obviously, some additional work needs to be done on this. But obviously, the additional price tag, I just want us to be very careful how we present the actual dollar cost, because really all of the items that we're talking about, I think a 4-way intersection rather than the T intersection on the boulevard just makes more sense. The opportunities for platforms for viewing the river fits into the theme of that whole national park area. I think from the permitting perspective, it appears to be some advantages as well. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to have a dramatic space entering Pawtucketville that will enhance the experience and increase the safety and the traffic flow. And I would just hate to see at the end of the day, you know, option one, which is basically putting the bridge right where it is, you know, wins out just because of a dollar cost. And I just think we're going to build something that's going to last, you know, longer than anybody on this call right now. So I just want to make sure we really put that in perspective going forward. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jerry. I don't see any other hands up from the working group members, and I don't see any written questions. So I'm now going to just check with the attendees and see if there are any raised hands for the public. Or any members of the public who've been watching, do you have questions you'd like to ask? If so, please raise your hand. Okay, doesn't look like we have any. So with that, I think we're ready just to close the meeting. I wanted to just mention a couple of things. As we said, there will be ongoing coordination with local and state officials through smaller group meetings as needed. There will be another working group meeting in the fall, and the public meeting is coming up. We will post the recording of this meeting on the project website. You have an opportunity to submit comments at any time on the website. The meeting, there will be a summary, written summary of the meeting as well. If you'd like the abbreviated version, we'll post a written meeting summary on the website as well. So with that, I want to thank everybody so much for your input. This has been a really productive meeting. Sorry it has to be a little shorter than the in-person meetings that we usually have. But I wanted to give Steve an opportunity to make any closing remarks he'd like, and we look forward to working with you and hearing your additional comments.
Thank you, Kate. And thank you all for coming. And this is a difficult time that we're dealing with, and presenting information in this format is also awkward, to say the least. But please bear with us. We had a lot of information to give you today, as you could see, from the traffic and the cost and the alignment and the context, the sensitivity, and everything that goes into this. And there's a real lot of moving parts, and we are really trying to get it right. And we can't do that without you. We need you to help us. As we go forward, we're planning on a public hearing at the end of August. We're scheduling that now. And then we're going to reconvene this group certainly in the fall, if not earlier. And stay tuned, please. Stay in contact with us through the website. I think with many of you, we may have more clarification, and we'll reach out, if you guys reach out to us, so that we'll chat individually as well. You know, with the hospital, we may have our own specific meeting to go over your ambulance routes, etc. We don't have to do that in a public forum. So bear with us, stay honest to get it right. We're really trying to do that. We'll see you at least in August. Stay safe, and thank you all.
Thank you, guys. Great job.